Hello, welcome to today's episode of Juicing the Numbers, your statistics and sports podcast. I am one of your hosts, Joshua Tracy. And of course, as you might be able to see if you are viewing this where things get viewed, I'm without Corwin today, under the weather in a way that affected both his, energy and his voice, which is just not good for an audio medium. Plus, fucking sleep it off. Fuck that working while you're sick bullshit. Even though this is fun work, fuck that shit. Do what you got to do. Nothing wrong with taking a day off, even from your fun activities, to get some rest when you're sick. So, big shouts to Corwin. Hope he revives a little bit. I hope to see him on the Monday episode. We'll catch up with him later. This is the Shakeia Taylor episode. She very graciously donated a lot of her time to me today to talk about a whole slew of things, and I did the exact same thing I did to Max, which is I took up way too much of their time, and still didn't get to all the things that I wanted to get into, but that's because of who I am as a person, and that's okay. It's always a good excuse and good fodder for a future conversation to get Shakeia back on the show. But she was wonderful, insightful, had a lot to say, a lot to contribute, and was just a great to talk to. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Shakeia Taylor.
Has anyone ever hit leave meeting on you? That makes me laugh.
Yes. We once held Max Greenfield, who is a very, very nice person, significantly longer than we had intended to, because it was the trade deadline conversation. Mm-hmm. And it was just so much longer than we were supposed to be talking. And he was like, I have to go. And we were like, all right, thanks for coming. And he was like, thank you. And then hit leave meeting. And we're like, oh shit, we really hope we didn't annoy you. But no one has exited mid conversation yet.
Okay.
Anyway, so we're joined today. I got this. I have to not speak in the plural today since Corwin is not here.
Why
not? Yeah, sure. There's plenty of me. I am joined today by writer for Baseball Prospectus as well as many other publications, Shakeia Taylor. Shakeia, welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show. Hi. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on. I've been following you on Twitter for a long time, and I think we have recently started following each other on Instagram, which has been fun because I know that you are also a plant person now, and I am a plant person, and I really contemplated gathering my plants behind me for this, and then decided that I didn't want to disturb them because they have their own lives, and didn't. But I thought about it.
I feel like that would have been cute though. I think plants are the new decor. People take, their Instagram pictures with their plants in the background. It's very hipster chic. So I think you should do it.
I have to refrain from posting every single new leaf that pops up in this apartment because I feel
do it on Mondays.
New leaf Mondays.
Yes, it's a thing. Do it on Monday.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's check the hashtag. It's a thing.
All right. Well, I'm gonna have to look into it. Damn. Okay. So, first of all, thank you again for coming on. I'm trying to just decide where I wanted to start this conversation because there's been a mix of things that have been happening and are currently going on that I think would make for decent topics, but I also want to hear a bit about you as a writer and what your process is like. So I think actually I'm going to start there if you don't mind. And I think I'm going to take it going backwards kind of chronologically, because I was thinking about writing topics, right? And, you do a lot of stuff with baseball history and kind of, getting into, I just reread your piece on Bob Gibson today because I very much so contemplated wearing my Bob Gibson jersey for this because I love him. And I couldn't help but wonder when it comes to something like history, when it comes to really any writing topic that you feel like you have some amount to say on it, when do you ultimately decide that you're done writing that specific piece? Do you ever feel like you hit a conclusion point, or do you feel like you have to actively stop yourself because otherwise this becomes a novella of sorts?
I think that a lot of times the piece stops itself. I was writing today it's a good example. I was writing today the piece I've been working on just for a couple of days, nothing like super research intensive. And I just kind of reached a point where it was like, I don't have anything else to say. And once you get there, I typically then send it to an editor because it's like, I've reached a natural stopping point. What do you think? Sometimes there will be incomplete, pieces in the piece and well, segments in the piece. I just was super redundant right there. And the editor will, want you to clean it up or answer a question or connect a dot that maybe you started at the top but didn't quite close at the bottom. And then that'll end up expanding a piece. But then sometimes I'll send something over and the editor will be like, well, that's it. Um, Craig Goldstein at Baseball Perspectives, actually, this is such a good lesson from him is, you know, don't focus on the word count. Like, don't force it. Sometimes you don't need 1,000 words to say something. Sometimes you only need a few hundred to get to the point. And I think ultimately, the piece writes itself, especially if it's inspired, if it's something like the historic pieces, obviously. I would imagine beat writing is a little different. But
Right.
like the more lengthy feature pieces, I feel like they're inspired. So there's something to tell. There's a place I want to go, or a place. Sometimes I start at the end and work my way backwards. Um, it's a thing. I enjoy it. Clearly, I'm like just rambling on about it right now. It's a fun experience to be able to tell a story from whatever angle you feel is relevant.
And how do you find that story that you're looking to tell? Obviously, with some things, there are moments that feed into the creation of an idea.
Mhm.
I'm not sure when your article on Bob Gibson came out, but I would imagine it was sometime around
When
his
he passed
passing.
away.
Yeah.
Yep.
And therein lies a moment that calls for a revisitation or some level of revisiting his history, the history of that time, because you also
Mhm.
included some events from 1968 that were prior to the actual baseball season, something significantly more important than a baseball season. And there's also times when I think, something you see something in that isn't directly tied to a story that you would normally tell. Like, I know I'm not sure if you are actively working on it, if you just mentioned working on a piece about Marcus Stroman and wearing durags on the mound. But
I
that,
am actively working on it.
okay, good. I was hoping you'd say that. There's where do you typically find your inspiration for the stories that you're looking to put down into paper and expand upon?
I gotta be honest, some of my pieces are like disc records. Like the people who they're for, they don't know that they're for them. So maybe they're more like subtweets.
Okay.
But like a lot of times I see something happening on the timeline or I read another person's piece and I hear like the ether voice in my head, like from the beginning of the song where he's like FJZ, right? Like that's where my mind goes. Like, I know you didn't just say that. I know you didn't just write that. Or and then I feel like I have to come and sort of clarify where you got it wrong. Like, and that was the case, especially with Bob Gibson. I find that traditional media likes to sort of rewrite history, and it happened with Henry Aaron. It just happens. Like
Mm-hmm.
it happens, and I don't want to say it doesn't happen with anyone else, but it happens particularly to African American athletes and historic figures. Their images become sort of sanitized and folks tend to forget like what actually happened, because these aren't events of 100 years ago. These are events that our grandparents were alive for. So I don't understand this whole like kind of, rose colored view of someone who experienced something traumatic. So that's one thing. Sometimes it's just me answering like, no, this is what really went down. But then like with Stro, right? Like that was just fun. I I remember being a teenager in the late 90s, and I remember, durags becoming like a thing of coolness for a little bit. And so to see it in an MLB game was just nuts. And then from a pitcher, bonkers. And Stroh kind of has a swagger about him that makes it even more interesting than, say, anyone else doing it, right? Like, this is a guy who has a brand and it's called Height Doesn't Measure Heart. He's got a lot of something about him that I think makes the do-rag an interesting thing. So, sometimes inspiration comes or the reason comes because I saw something fun. And obviously the Stro thing is a non-serious piece, which people aren't used to seeing from me, but I think people will love it. I think it'll get a good reception.
I mean, I'm excited for it. I think it's a fascinating idea and I love it. And I've been looking because I was watching a Brewers game the other day because
Mhm.
I am currently infatuated with Freddie Peralta.
Okay.
Because he's just so much fun to watch. And I thought I saw Devin Williams wearing a do-rag too while he was in relief. And
Someone
I'm
else messaged me that. I think what's happening is people are just going to start adding me on Twitter when they see anything that looks remotely like a do-rag in a game, and I'm totally fine with that. But I want to point out that like sometimes what people are calling do-rags are scullies,
I was going
skull
to say,
caps,
yeah, and that's
you
where I
know?
wasn't sure on it. But I
Yeah.
also had the thought of, I'm not sure I would have noticed it if you
Hmm.
hadn't mentioned that you were going to be writing a piece about Marcus Stroman wearing one. And I think, that's the impact of, even though it's relative compared to, I guess, some of your other work, more lighthearted, or I don't want to say less
Hmm.
serious because representation matters in a whole slew of ways. But it's minor impacts on seeing how people are not, I guess, changing how they would behave otherwise due to any type of pressure and just kind of being who they are. Because
Hmm.
in regular everyday life, walking around a city, Devin Williams wearing a do-rag is not something anyone should be looking. I mean, that's just a guy not wanting to fuck up his hair. And it's like
Exactly.
it's something you don't see much in MLB games, and it's not something I'm sure I would
Yeah.
have like so much so picked up on if not for the fact that you said you were writing an article about it. And the article hasn't even come out.
I know. Well, there was a little controversy about, the do-rag. Bob Brenly, the Diamondbacks broadcaster, made some comment like,
Oh,
I don't
this
know,
was
Tom
the
Seaver
yeah.
do-rag. And I don't really have an opinion on it. It's just kind of like it wasn't funny. Like so I know when people say it was a joke, but it's like if you have to say that, it wasn't funny. It didn't land. Maybe reconsider the joke. Maybe you're not funny. Like everything doesn't need to be a joke. And I think sometimes, like, particularly with things that are specific to a person's culture, just don't make the joke. If you're not a
Mm-hmm.
part of that group, don't make the joke and you don't have to worry about putting your foot in your mouth. So, but I like, I'm not writing about that, thankfully. I actually hopefully have kept that completely out of the piece entirely because I wanted it to be fun,
Right.
like let's talk about wins, losses, and do-rags. What do-rag color, does Stroh pitch best in? Which one is his worst? Which one should he wear? Like there's a lot of fun and just involved in that. And the do-rag has a cape, and you saw my tweets, and I was referring to him as a black superhero because of the tucked under cape. Yeah, just went off there about do-rags.
Yeah, but that's part of the idea of representation in media. It's not an article that has been written before, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
reason that we were getting announced because we got someone who's going to pick up on that shit and put
Yep.
it down to paper. That's the whole idea.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you feel as though you you feel the biggest gap or the biggest largest amount of representation for you as a baseball fan comes up in media. You know, there's not a lot of Black women that write about sports in general, and baseball in particular, because it is such a stodgy old white sport.
Mm-hmm.
So where do you feel as though you fall in, like, where did you have anybody growing up that you felt represented you, or was there someone that you're looking to kind of write articles for?
Well, first, you know, as a Black woman who is writing about baseball kind of as a career now, I cannot not mention the incomparable Claire Smith, right? Like, she was the first to ever do it. And so, like, massive influence. I actually wrote something like to her for last year's Women in Baseball conference, because I felt like paying homage to her was super important. And then I think growing up watching sports, I don't even think I thought about too much with regard to representation because of the time in which I grew up. You know what I mean? Like, we're talking about, I started watching baseball in the early 90s. So there was hella Black people. Like, there was no question of, is this game one I'm gonna watch? No
Right.
one was telling me, you know, why are you watching baseball? You know, like, that just didn't happen because there were fun Black Americans in the game. And I know, you know, I wasn't even thinking because I got to enjoy it all. Now as an adult, and you know, it's different. It's getting better. It's changing a little bit. I would say, now that there's been sort of a hyper focus on, you know, inclusion, I think, you know, things will start to move a little bit, maybe at like a glacial pace, but things will start to move. But I want like people to not focus so much on diversity and focus on the inclusion part. Because like once you get the diversity, you can't make those people feel unwelcome. You
Mm-hmm.
can't, you know, continue with the same behavior. And I think that's kind of where things are getting a little foggy lately. It's like, hey, we want diversity, but we're not going to include you. And, you know, I think the focus should start to shift to inclusion. Like, what are you doing to make the space comfortable? What are you doing to show that folks are welcome and that certain behaviors are unwelcome? That's kind of where, you know, I think in all things, we as humans kind of fail. We want everybody to be a part, but then nobody wants to be the person that kicks out shitty people, but we have to. Like, we kind of have to. And the culture around Major League Baseball fandom is that. Like, the good people are going to have to start excommunicating the shitty folks in order for that diversity to be inclusion.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the idea of include, a lot of it is not so much, well, not honestly, not so much, but there is a difference between needing to bring people in and needing to understand why those people aren't coming in naturally.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes the reason people aren't coming in on their own is because whatever in is fucking sucks for them.
Yep.
Like, no one wants to walk into, even on in a casual sense, no one wants to walk into a bar that's playing bad music, because you're going to walk into that bar and be like, this sucks. This
Yeah.
is awful music surrounded by people that love it. That, hey, guess what? I fucking hate country. I'm not going to walk into the country bar. That's not my people. And if they want me to walk into the bar, they don't have to convince me that country's awesome. They might have to change the music.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that applies, I think, to a lot more serious instances than just country bars. But that's often the case. You know, you're right. It's, if you employ bad people and you bring bad people into the stands and you have bad people playing for your team, you're going to get more bad people. And then good
Yep.
people, they don't want to be there.
Exactly.
So getting a little bit more, I guess, into what got you here. Well, what got you into baseball? Where did that come from? Because I feel like with baseball especially, people tend to have a thing that brought them in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got into baseball because my family relocated from North Carolina to Ohio, and that was in 1993, which was a pretty good entry point to the baseball team in Cleveland. And yeah, it was a good way to make friends when you're, 10, 11 years old, moving to a completely different state. And I mean, obviously, like we'd visited, we have family in Ohio, but we didn't live there. So it was different. I mean, I went from where people say soda to where people say pop. And
Have you converted, or are you still a soda person?
I still say soda.
Okay.
um, but baseball was the basis of friendship for me for a lot of my youth, right? Like a lot of
Playing,
my friends,
watching, all of it.
mostly watching. I tried playing very briefly. One of my cousins taught me how to catch, and I ended up being really good. And so I played for like a summer. And then I would play for fun, in college if friends wanted to, play in like a pizza and beer, league or something like that. But otherwise, um, I don't know. I got out of sports as like an athlete at probably like 15, 16. It was like I don't like to be sweaty. So it's nice to enjoy it from this side.
Yeah, I hated running, and I mean I still hate running, but I ended up quitting several sports when I was like a very young kid because I loved playing. I hated running. And you know what? When you're like 10, 11 years old, you can't just look at a grown up and be like, I'm not running. Like, I know you said to keep playing basketball, I got to do all this running, but I don't want to do the running because they're going to look at you and be like, you're 10, do it or leave. And I left.
That's so funny. I ran track, and I'll
Oh,
never
God bless
forget.
you.
I ran the 400 in less than a minute, and um, so I didn't love running, but I wasn't too bad at
Yeah, honestly, even today, because I think everyone went through the pandemic and was like, all right, what do I got to do to fix the mistakes I made in the last 18 months? And running was not even on the table for me. And you know what's crazy? I'm 26. I'm not old. I'm not old at all, and I know
it.
it.
I am.
But stop it. Get out of here. I, I don't even want to hear it. No, you're not. But so I tried running sometime just pre-pandemic, like just pre-pandemic, and my knee started to hurt. And I go to the orthopedist, and he was like, "Oh yeah, like your knee is pre-arthritic." And I was like, "What the fuck are you talking about? I don't how?" And he's like, "You
Probably
just
from lack of movement.
no." He's like, "You just got fucked." Yeah,
Oh.
it's just the way it is. And it's like, you know what? I would have never found out about this if I didn't run. I should have just never run. And now I gotta just live with the fact. I was like, what do I do? He was like, nothing. It's like, damn it. Oh, this is a terrible way to continue going through life. But hey, you just gotta rock and roll with it, I guess.
Well, now you
No.
have an excuse for not running.
That is my built-in excuse. And it's also my excuse for not hiking because I don't understand all that outdoorsy stuff.
Mm,
I
um,
I like being bug free. I don't need the bugs.
at the in the early, I guess, ish parts of the pandemic, since we're still in it, July of last year, I sprained my ankle pretty badly doing pretty much nothing.
Ooh. How's it recovered?
Well, I'm old, so I feel like I still feel it a little bit. But it's not, I don't know, I can walk. It was bad. I'm talking like my toes were purple, my foot was like this big, it was gigantic. There were like dark lines on my ankle that I thought I had broken it. And it turned out that it was just sprained beyond. And after the first 72 hours, I went to get it looked at, And the doctor at the urgent care was like, it's by the grace of God that your ankle isn't broken. And I was like, well, that's good. He's like, you got some strong bones. And I ended up just needing to wear like one of those like I don't know, it's like an ace bandage, but it laces up, so it's kind of
Yeah.
sturdy. I had to wear one of those for 8 weeks.
Oh my God.
And the bruising, it went away. This is how things happen for me. I slipped and fell after like an ice situation here in Chicago, um, maybe like 2014. And I broke my arm in two places, but it was non-displaced. So like the bones were still sitting next to each other. And so all I had to do was just wear it, just like wrapped it in a sling for 2 months and it was fine. Like I do stuff, but I do it just enough.
Oh no, oh God, I know I could never be a doctor because I hated
You're
hearing that.
squeamish.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I'm such a wuss when it comes to any of that stuff. Oh my God, no, absolutely not.
I
Um,
thought I was doing pretty good at not giving too much of a description.
oh no, I am just a huge baby when it when it comes like oh my yeah no I'm good. Uh, so did being I guess more bedridden or more house ridden than the standard pandemic person would be. Did that affect your approach to writing at all? Did you end up writing more or less, or did it vary your sense of perspective at all?
Well, I was definitely one of those folks last year, and I kind of still am, to be quite honest, who just was like, I'm gonna stay in the house. I'm gonna stay away from people. So, um, messing up my ankle was kind of a blessing because then I didn't have to worry about anyone asking me to do anything because I couldn't go anywhere. And I live on the third floor of a walk up. And
Mm,
anyone who lives in the city knows that you're not walking down those stairs or up those stairs unless you absolutely are ready to. So it didn't affect writing, I would say. It was, I think, more of the world affected my writing than, being immobile. Um, Being immobile does mean that you have to sit with your thoughts, though. There aren't too many things that you can do to distract yourself. And, I played, Nintendo Switch a ton when I was stuck on the couch with my leg propped up day in and day out. But it didn't affect writing. I would,
did it?
I would, I think it actually made me lazier.
I was gonna ask, did it give you? Did you do more reading, or did that, which is I think everyone who reads, constant battle to maintain their schedule of reading, did it not help the cause for reading?
Nah. So along with the pandemic went my focus. Like I can start a book, I can get a good halfway through it, and then suddenly it'll be like, oh, what's happening over there? And um, and then I'll have to come back to it later. I would say my thing when my ankle was messed up, that is still a thing, is watching Law and Order reruns. And I mean all of them, not just SVU, Criminal Intent, OG Law and Order UK. Like
I didn't even know there was a UK.
if I turn on the TV and Law and Order isn't on the channel that I left the TV on, I can find it on another channel and it's it's bad. Like it's bad.
I understand, but at the same time, when hearing something so familiar as like reruns or whatever has a very comforting feeling, which I think at the past 2 years we've all needed. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Law and Order and baseball. That's what I
baseball's
watch.
got great sounds.
Hey,
I
I started a Twitter thread with baseball references in Law and Order episodes, to kind of marry the two. That's been my pandemic thing. That
I mean, that is a significantly more productive use of your time than I think anything that I've done this pandemic has been. So hats off to you for that. Uh, so to get a little bit more back into your
Mhm.
writing, as we've taken ourselves a nice little tangent. So you're watching baseball, you try playing it a little bit. How did you end up actually getting into writing it? Where did the desire to be like, because you write when you feel something needs to get out. I've got this in me. It can't be in just me. I've got to put it other places. So what led to such a strong feeling or such an urge that you ended up actually being like, all right, here we go. I got to do this.
Well, I started writing for fun. Like I wrote all the time as a kid, never really thought it would be a thing for me.
Like
So
fiction or
whatever. I mean, I've said this a million times now. I've written my own like origin story. It's not a real thing. I wrote it as if I was like a Marvel superhero. Um and there's lots of like, thunder and lightning and, lots of insanity. But I started writing as a kid, and writing is kind of a joyous thing for me. And I entered in writing competitions, as a teenager and won some. And there's this event that was held every year by Youngstown State University called the English Festival. And I would participate in that and, win. And so writing has always just kind of been a thing that I enjoy doing and researching. And, I participated in this event called History Day, which is basically just incentivizing young kids to research and write a paper, basically on theme. So it's always kind of been there for me. And the baseball thing happened because I decided I was going to start a blog. I was like, there are no young Black women talking about baseball. I'm going to start a blog. And I did. And I ended up unemployed for a little bit. So I was able to go on the road to a couple of games in different places. And I was able to, get out and meet people. Because the one thing they don't tell you with baseball is because so many games are played during the day, you got to have free time for that. Like, you got to be able, unless you root for a team that plays at night a lot, you know. But so I was able to kind of indulge in day games and meeting people, for drinks or food or whatever for games, and it just took off from there. Folks were interested. I wouldn't say I'm like the most interesting person um on social media, but I think I'm different than what was previously available with regard to the sport, and people, they like that. They like that I'm myself. I'm always the same person.
so your earlier stuff, was it more just like Shakeia's thoughts on the game, like on field game itself? Was it personnel driven, like here's who's playing for the Cubs and what I think about them, or what was
It
like the
was
subject
everything.
matter?
It was kind of everything. Like, I particularly liked pitching matchups. So occasionally, I would go to a game and I would post about, the pitching matchup. Or I might go to a game and I might comment on like what's happening in the stands. I remember at one point I had a very like lengthy thread of like what not to do at a baseball game just for fun. And it was things like, if the ball is moving, sit down.
Hmm.
You don't have to walk to the end of the aisle for your beer. People will pass it to you. Like that's, like just stuff like that. Or I went to a game once and a woman, her baby was like fascinated with my friend and I. And obviously this is pre-pandemic. And my friend just puts her arms out and this baby comes from the row in front of us into her arms and just sits with us for the game. And the mom is like, okay, he looks fine to me. She's like throwing him back. Like, I wrote about stuff like that. Just anything surrounding the game, I wrote about it. And I think, having a fresh perspective, it was popular. Hey, look at this girl. She's seeing it in a different light or through new eyes or whatever.
Yeah. Was was there a specific article or blog post or anything where you looked at it and you were like, this is so good, or I feel so strongly about this, uh quality of work, pride, what have you, I this is going to be my career. I have to make this work. Did you
Nope.
have an article like that or a moment?
Nope. Nope. It's actually far less magical and way more practical than that. Like,
Lay it on me.
an editor who followed me on Twitter just was like, "Hey, would you be interested in writing? Like, it doesn't pay much to start, but you've got a great voice, and you can see where it goes from there." And I said, "Okay." Like, it was really just super practical. Someone saw me, like what I was doing, thought I could contribute more, gave me a shot. And
Have
from
you
there, it just kind of rolled very quickly.
have you had any of those kind of articles since then though during your career where you were like this? Like, is there any piece of work of yours that you've revisited for whatever reason?
Baseball and jazz, I've actually recently revisited it, and I was very interested in, I feel like there's more to it. I can't help but feel like there's something, like I left something on the table with that one. Not necessarily that there's more to that specific and exact story, but there is a tangent there. There is something that I could kind of take off on. Because it's an interesting, like, I don't know if you've read that one. It's really long, or at least it felt really long to write. But it's on Baseball Perspective. It's
Mm-hmm.
literally just titled Baseball and Jazz. It's not the one about Jazz Chisholm. It's the one I link to in the one about jazz. And I just like draw a line through history connecting the word jazz and the history of the genre to baseball. And it's real cool. But in it, I learned that Louis Armstrong had a barnstorming baseball team called the Secret Nine, and no one knows their names. There is like a very popular picture of them floating around. It's actually in my piece, but no one knows their names. There is another historian who actually went digging to try to find out these guys' names, and he only found one person. Because the person, obviously they passed away, but their family recognized him from photos that they had, and they had lost most of their pictures in a hurricane, but somehow had just like one memento or two or three things that they were able to compare. So anyway, so that's 1 out of 9. So there's 8 other players who are unidentified. And I just keep thinking about that. Like, why? Why is it a secret? Like, what was their identity? Why was it kept a secret? Were they musicians? Were they in the military? Were they, like there's just so many ways I could go. I may never find the answer. Or someone may pay me a ton of money to go to New Orleans and spend some time digging. And the story could be the digging. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be that I find something, but man, I would love to find something. I just
This is the Plowed National Treasure 3. Let's do it.
hit me up, Nicolas Cage. I don't know, but like there's something compelling there. Like there's something alluring. It's pulling me to want to go to Louisiana. And I mean, worst case scenario, there's a really good fictional story that I could pull from the situation, because who wouldn't want to read a great story that happens, in New Orleans with jazz and, maybe a band and a baseball game, and maybe there's a murder mystery. I don't know, but that's the one, Baseball and Jazz. If you haven't read it and you do read it, let me know what you think.
I will have to, because I did confuse it at first for the jazz. We got the article, which I have read. I got to go back and now read the baseball and jazz article, especially because I grew up in a very jazz household.
Okay.
And I love jazz. And my grandfather, who's played in the same orchestra for the past 45 years, has very strong opinions on jazz. And it's led to me experiencing jazz that and growing up with the oh my God, I'm forgetting his name. The goddamn guy who makes seemingly every 10-part documentary series that's ever been on PBS. Ken
Ken Burns.
Ken Burns, thank you. Jesus. Him and his 10-part series on jazz really shaped how I view it. Because my grandfather, I don't know which type of jazz or which era of jazz, if you listen to it at all, you grew up with or resonate the most with. My grandfather hated Frank Sinatra. Well, still, he's alive. My grandfather hates Frank Sinatra. And my grandfather hates Frank Sinatra because he thinks it's the most soulless version of jazz and that it's not what jazz is about. And Frank Sinatra was a pop star who just sang jazz, whereas
I
there
don't
was
consider Sinatra to be jazz. I'm with
right.
your grandpa.
But Sinatra gets lumped in with a lot of those, like jazz greats. And while there is a historical through line because of the linear progression of time from Billie Holiday to Frank Sinatra, there's no spiritual through line. And really, Frank Sinatra is a guy who heard other people sing, took their songs, he never wrote anything, and would just make almost mass-produced jazz like it's the Domino's pizza of jazz. It's like jazz, but is it? And it's been that has shaped a lot of how I view those types of differences, in addition to the Ken Burns documentary, which really hammers home the point in like the first episode about how the racial disparities within jazz and how much I felt as though it could also be connected to baseball, which also makes sense because Ken Burns made a 10-part baseball documentary. And, one of the big things with it was in that first episode or two where he talks about how Black jazz musicians weren't allowed to get the sheet music for any of their shows because the white musicians didn't think that they could read music. And so it forced all the Black jazz musicians to learn all the songs in secret away from the white jazz musicians because they wouldn't show them any of the stuff. They had to find out from somebody else who knew the songs and then go into play. And then all the white musicians would go, well, they're not getting the sheet music because they can't read it. And they're so naturally talented. They don't even need the sheet music. They don't even need the progression of how we're going to be running this 6-minute long nonsensical piece, because jazz is very, very hard theoretically, in addition to practically. And I think a lot of that concept also you see a lot with athleticism. A lot of it's like, oh, well, he's Black, he must be stealing a bunch of bases. Why isn't he must be faster than your average person? And I think the two inform each other very well because of their equally rocky histories with how they treat things and how much in the years since the bodies that be that kind of dictate how we view the past, view them less segregation-y and more like, oh, they came together eventually. Don't ask why they weren't together in the first place. No one knows. Lost to time. But they came together and worked as a team. Just also happened to be around the late 1940s. Don't ask why. And it's that part of it that I think, I think has that very shitty overlap to it. But actually, hold on, I have to go down back to my questions. I am also notorious for having 9,000 tabs open, and we'll have to navigate back. So sorry about that.
Okay.
Speaking of which, one of the other points that I saw you raise on Twitter the other day that has never once left my mind, and I actually saw it happen in real time and knew you were going to respond to it because of it, was the fact that Jackie Robinson needs to stop being invoked, the name therein, every single time there is a point about race made in baseball.
Doesn't matter what's happening.
Oh my God. And I forget the context of it. Was like I think it was like literally this past week that someone had done it. And I saw that you responded to it. And I was like, I knew she would, because I now can't unsee this. It is the laziest fucking thing in the world. Well, yeah. And that's the thing, is it's not that it necessarily is wrong to use a catch-all expression in a limited character format. But it is lazy and very disrespectful to, one, Jackie, and two, the fact that there were so many people who did so many things, and it's not just Jackie, and his name shouldn't have to bear every racial incident that MLB goes through as a result of its own stupidity and vileness. That his name has to be tied to it as a carte blanche symbol of virtue that he doesn't have to be. And it's frustrating now to have to witness that. And I thank you for the education. And I'm also mildly annoyed that now I have to be annoyed about that.
Well, it's also like I said this to someone earlier, but I look at a lot of things like that. Just look at it from its simplest form, at its simplest level, right? And the question that I'm gonna ask you, you're gonna laugh, but my thought when I saw that was, what does Jackie Robinson have to do with Barstool? Like that was, and if someone can ask you that and you cannot draw a direct line, don't mention him. Like, just leave it alone. Let him rest in peace. Like
Mhm.
that is, I wrote a piece last summer called Dear Jackie, and everyone took it as, I mean, I love that people love it. I love that people felt things from it. Because it was saying something. But what people were missing was that I was taking all of the things that people sort of falsify about Jackie Robinson and flipping it. Like flipping it. I was referencing things that he said. Like, I posted a picture of a PDF on my Instagram when George Floyd was murdered. And it was just the top of Jackie Robinson's column, and it said, Jackie Robinson says, watch that cop brutality. So when you see like the Dodgers release these statements that are like, you know, Jackie would have wanted a peaceful protest, go to hell. Go
Mhm.
to hell. You're making things up. And that's what bothers me, the weaponizing of heroes against their own community. It's a tragedy. I hate it so much. And I'm not sorry that you're now going to be annoyed by it every time you see it, because the more of us who are, we can say something. And you know, I was pretty polite the other day. I wasn't trying to be mean or anything, but I definitely was like, this doesn't have anything to do with Jackie. Let's let Jackie rest.
Yeah, there is an very unhelpful like politicizing of a lot of people's history that does
Hmm.
absolutely no one any type of service. And it applies to basically everyone who ever actually fought for something. And it happens most often, I think, at least in popular media, to historically Black figures because it is in response to something else. You know, it is like the Dodger statement. Oh, don't be violent because that guy didn't want you to be violent. And
Right.
we're just going to pick some statements here and there and ignore some of the other stuff, or how they were perceived at the time. Like Martin Luther King Jr., this happens to him all the time. And he was derided in his era for having violent protests because oftentimes when he would have a protest, which he always wanted to have nonviolent ones, things would get violent because of the police.
Yep.
And he was heavily criticized and derided by public media at the time because whether or not he intended for his protests to be violent or nonviolent, he always preached nonviolence, they would inevitably get violent due to the actions of somebody else,
Right.
usually the white people and the police. And so holding him up as the bastion of don't do that doesn't really work because it didn't apply then and it doesn't apply now.
Hmm.
It's a complete mischaracterization of both past events and present ones for an agenda, whether you think you have an agenda or not. And that's the part that is just oh so shitty because there's going to be a kid who doesn't know that and is going to go, yeah, no, Martin Luther King Jr. Oh my, man, he no nothing. He stopped violence everywhere he went. He was floating on his feet, never touched the ground. Best guy ever. Stopped. He turned guns into flowers. and everyone loved him at the time. And the fact he was murdered was like totally accidental. And it's no, people have complex pasts, people have complex histories, and people fought for a lot of things that they might not seem they did because, well, does MLB want you to think that Jackie Robinson was a revolutionary? Is that what they want? I don't
No,
think
of
MLB
course
wants you to think that.
Right. Right. I think with anything like that, this is kind of the positive of social media, right? We get to tell what's really real. Martin Luther King Jr., his daughter is the person telling the truth now. Same with Jackie Robinson. His daughter is now in charge of making sure that, you know, who her father really was is what we know and not what, you know, MLB's savior complex wants us to think.
And, you know, to I guess pivot a little bit into a conversation on MLB, which is always a fun topic that I think no one ever complains about. It astonishes me, and it's something that my co-host Corin and I've talked about on this podcast a lot. It astonishes me why they won't grapple with their past and their awful history with segregation and generally just racism and being awful. Because if Rob Manfred came out when they why they think they have the power is a different question, but why when they quote unquote elevated the Negro Leagues to a major league, which again, power dynamics be damned. They'll just move on from that for a moment. Why they couldn't come out and say something to the effect of we suppressed an entire segment of the population into feeling as though their only action to continue to play baseball was to form their own league. And we can't change that, but we can make sure that their stories are better represented and more accessible by using our resources to put them on pages and in books and in places where all of the other major league players from that era also are, to try to bring that history to the people, because we did that and we prevented it. And if they did that, I don't think anyone's going to look at Rob Manfred and say, you did that. You know, no one's going to look at Rob Manfred and say, are you still Kennesaw Mountain Landis? Is that you? Everyone's going to understand that it was an organization that is still existent today and holds the weight of those choices. I don't want to say errors because that sounds too passive. Choices to do horrible things, but that you can also usher in a new era without anyone assigning that blame specifically to you, Rob Manfred, or whomever within the front office, and be able to actually do something productive and use the active voice because it was still your organization. I think people would be smart enough and care enough to hear that level of understanding from them that they just will never, just don't give. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think if a statement like that were to come out, I think people who are super resistant, a lot of them would end up just being okay with it because they carry water for rich people and the rich people are right to them. So if we can get, you know, something like that to get them on track, then why not? It would be great, but it won't happen, like you said.
Yeah, it you know, it's very frustrating because I don't think MLB is in such a position to do the right thing almost constantly, and they always choose not to. And they act, I would imagine it's out of fear for money or a continued desire to be bad morally,
Mm-hmm.
under the guise of losing potential money, alienating an old white fan base, what have you. And I think, if anything, acknowledging the time around integration, we should also recognize to you that, well, after MLB integrated, I don't think they hurt financially. I think they did just fine. I'm sure if there was any old grumpy white guys that didn't want to watch African American ball players play ball and left. So I don't think they did, because their baseball teams all of a sudden got really good. And at the end of the day, a lot of those threats are empty threats that mean nothing, because I watched baseball yesterday. I'm going to watch it tomorrow. And that's, I think,
Hmm.
the thought most of these assholes are going to have. And I don't think MLB costs themselves anything by like doing the right thing. I think literally has a net cost that is positive. I don't think there's a single negative to it, because these people, where else are they going to go?
I
If they
thought
want to watch
2020
ball, they're
would
going
have
to
been a
watch.
good season to make radical change because there was no one to complain about, I'm not coming. You can't come anyway. They could have done so much in the 2020 season with no fans in the stands. And by the time people are able to come and complain about it, they don't remember what they're complaining about anyway, because it's been over a year since they've been able to get to a game. They weren't thinking. They weren't thinking. They could have taken advantage of that, like big time.
Oh, I choose to believe that they made a conscious choice to do all this. I refuse to believe that a room full of people with that much educational background didn't consider it. I think that's being far too kind to them.
I mean, I'm not saying they didn't. I'm just saying it was a missed opportunity.
Oh,
Like whether
absolutely.
they did or didn't, just completely missed opportunity.
Well, and they have missed opportunities with that type of stuff all the time. Like it's so tough. I hate bringing up shitty people, but my co-host and I talked when Trevor Bauer ultimately ended up hitting the administrative leave list, whatever they call it, the commissioner's list. I don't recall, about how that's an opportunity to educate young or even middle-aged straight white men about consent, because it might be something that there is a genuine gap in knowledge in. There might
Hmm.
be actually an opportunity for, because your viewer base is very male and it is very white, and this
Hmm.
is maybe a lesson they just never got. Let's take a genuine, true, not shitty perspective on it. It's actually ignorant in a non-vicious way, and they don't understand that there are lines that literally just can't be crossed, and that consent can change over the course of an interaction, what have you. And instead, it just kind of left, and we just get an update from like Jeff Passan or John Heyman every 7 days, letting us know that the administrative leave has been extended another 7 days. And that's, I guess it's not harming anybody actively, but it's also not helping a situation that you actually have a real opportunity to put out statements and give an education on to people who might not understand that, like, look, she said yes when you started, when she walked in the door, and she can say no or even be less enthused at any time. And that is a loss of consent in that moment, and really make a point out of it. And they just choose not to. And
Hmm.
I have to think, because it seems so obvious to myself and to my co-host that they don't want the attention on it for whatever reason that is. They think it looks bad. They don't like that some parts of their organization are icky. It might offend some people who are in an organization, because otherwise they could do good. They could really do good. That's
Hmm.
part of I think, like, a health class that I don't think was a part of my health class when I was a kid. That could change a life, and they just choose not to do it. It's ah, nah, I knew this would be a fun one. Love talking about MLB. Always a good source of conversation. So another thing I'd like to be grumpy and complain about in regards to MLB, because I want to hear what you think. This episode is coming out actually tomorrow. I'm not sure if I actually mentioned that. So it'll be out August 12th. Oof. And that will be the Field of Dreams game, where
Hmm.
the New York Yankees will be taking on the Chicago White Sox in Iowa, at the actual farm that the Field of Dreams field was constructed for, the movie Field of Dreams.
Hmm.
What do you think about this entire ordeal?
Well, the youth game, which I have on was delayed for a storm to pass. And with the way the weather has been, it's possible they may not play tomorrow if it storms the way it's supposed to. However, that being said, um, I find it interesting that this game is happening, mostly because Field of Dreams, the movie, had sort of moved out of pop culture. Like, it's not a movie a lot of people have seen anymore. It's
It's been a
not
very
like,
relevant thing to do 25 years ago. Yes.
right. It's like, okay, all right, cool. And then the other part is it's not a very good movie. Like, most people who remember it don't remember it well. Like, they just remember the things that made it into pop culture. That aside, I thought, them going to those throwback jerseys was cool. Um, I, there were no Black baseball players in Field of Dreams. So would like to see that addressed, maybe. Also, I'm actually looking forward to Sox Yankees. The Sox are kind of up and down since the All-Star break. You know, today's game, they lost a one-run game, like literally 1-0 to the Twins. They lost yesterday to the Twins. They can't seem to put Cleveland away all the time. So it's like, if you're not good against good teams and you're not great against bad teams, then what do we expect? And I've seen a lot of, the Sox are back to 100% almost. And it's like, okay, great. But somebody has to not only hit, but get on base and then make it home. And this isn't happening. Like, I've watched a couple of games where they've stranded, you know, bases loaded. What are you doing? You have to knock somebody home. And the Yankees on the other side having some struggles. I honestly was not expecting the Yankees to struggle the way they have been this season, and yet they're still in it in true Yankee fashion, right? Just when you think that you're not going to have to look at them, here they come. Um, so I can't even say who I think is going to win because it could go either way at any point. It just depends, like which team luck seems to favor tomorrow. But I'm gonna watch. I think it's cool. um I do think it sucks that it's in an area where games are usually blacked out, which is kind of shitty. And I also think it sucks that I understand extremely limited ticket availability, and I know that most of it went to celebrities and media,
Hmm.
but there should have been some sort of effort, and there should always be some sort of effort to make sporting events affordable for the people who live near it. Like, at minimum, the least you can do is make it so that, communities can come and children can come. And I'm sure people in Dyersville are included, but I mean that, like, generally, there are people from Illinois who drove down. I imagine people from Indiana probably popped over. It just wasn't for it to be such an event, it wasn't affordable. But it looks like they're doing it again next year. So
Yeah, I saw it was the Cubs and it was Cubs
I
somebody,
didn't
right?
Yeah, I didn't see who the other team was yet, but I did see that it was the Cubs, and I saw the
Cubs
Cardinals
Cardinals.
want to be it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Hmm.
it is shitty in regards to the tickets that they like. Cannes Film Festival in France, second biggest, I guess, and independent film festival next to Sundance. Uh, they I looked into going one year just out of curiosity. I didn't really have any intention. I just wanted to know what it took. And the film festival takes place in the town of Cannes, France, and to avoid having a gigantic influx of people into what is like a very small, not very, but like a small-ish provincial town, they don't sell tickets. So you can't kind of just go. But what
Yeah.
they do is that they let the locals go to all the shows. I mean, they have to like pay for like a pass or some shit to actually do it. But if you live
Hmm.
in Cannes, France, like you can go because you're in the area. And if anything, we're inconveniencing you by doing this here. And I don't think it would be very hard to do that in the Field of Dreams game, something local to Iowa. I can't imagine that'd be horribly difficult to actually accomplish. I mean, if it requires proof of address, so does getting like a fucking library card. So I think if the public library system can figure it out, MLB can figure it out.
Right.
Doesn't seem like it'd be very challenging, but regardless, I think my biggest issue with it is symbolic, because this is MLB's biggest, clearest way that they can draw attention to a topic, a medium, and a location, is playing a game. I mean, that's what people tune in for. You know, and baseball has attempted to grow itself by playing in a bunch of various regions. You know, there's all types of stories written about how MLB stars going over to Japan grew the game so much down there. Negro League stars growing the game in Latin America that led to so much popularity of the game in Latin America. And focusing your attention on where your game is being played obviously yields to people paying attention to why you're doing it. In this instance, because it's some stupid fucking movie that, it's funny you mentioned the whole rewatch thing. I rewatched it a couple years ago, having not seen it since I was a kid, and remembering to myself, this is a great movie. I love this movie, right? Oh my God, it's awful. And you really just remember like the last 10, 15 minutes when all the ghosts come out of the cornfield and they play a baseball game. And it takes like an hour and 50 minutes to get there or some shit. And you're like, oh my God, it's just Kevin Costner driving for like an hour and a half. And then everyone's white. And,
yep.
and I don't, if MLB did stuff like this consistently across a board to make a point of something, I think I'd be okay with this game more, because it's lighthearted and goofy, and not everything needs to be serious, and sure, why not? But it's the fact that they clearly recognize that there is an advantage in doing this to raise attention to a thing that happened 25 years ago, and that people have some fondness for whatever reason. And you could do that with other stuff that matters more too. Like, there's nothing preventing you from doing games at fields of former Negro League teams, or doing them at fields of former minor league team or current minor league teams, even that are in remote areas where people, so that people who live in, I don't know, Montana don't have to drive like 16 hours to go see, I guess the Rockies would probably be the closest, or maybe California. I don't know. But, you know, there's reasons that you could play games in non-MLB stadiums that I think would actually be interesting, impactful, and fun, that aren't just one of the like half dozen movies from the 90s about baseball that like all kind of suck, and just has a novelty value instead of something a little bit more impactful. It in the spirit of MLB and missed opportunities, it feels like a missed opportunity.
No, I mean, they could do so much, so much, and choose to do so little. They have so much capital. Like, I think the people in the Southeast who are not in, you know, Atlanta or Florida would like to watch a baseball game in person, you know? They're not growing as in like expanding the game. They're more growing and expanding their capital.
Well, yeah, it feels like the most, if baseball's demographic is old white people, then the Field of Dream games is exactly what they want. Because if your entire existence is predicated around nostalgia and whiteness, then you must love the Field of Dreams. I mean, that is on the nose for you. You know, it is a movie that it is at this point, it is a nostalgic movie about nostalgia and being white. And also James Earl Jones is there. And you're right. Like, if you wanted, who are you growing? What audience are you achieving that you did not have prior by doing this? That's part of the problem. Yeah, because if they played a game in Alabama, I mean, and obviously Alabama, a huge sports state, their
Mhm.
college athletes are treated like kings because it's the biggest sport there. There's not a lot of other main sports that are played in Alabama. If MLB was to go down and play a game in Alabama, I bet it would be packed. They're not near anything to go to. It is.
Yep.
How long of a drive is it from Alabama to Georgia? I have no idea. I bet it's a very fucking long drive.
I don't think it's too bad.
I live in the Northeast. Anything longer than an hour is a long drive for me.
Oh, see, it would take that long to get across town in Chicago. I'm actually gonna look this up. Where in Alabama? Let's say Birmingham.
Yeah, that sounds right. Those were the two towns I knew.
I have a friend from there.
Say Birmingham and Mobile, I think, are the only towns I could name to you offhand.
It's 2 hours from Birmingham to Atlanta.
Wait, it's that close?
Yeah, I was like, wait, I don't think it's that far. Yeah,
in my
2 hours
mind,
and 12 minutes.
In my mind, that is
Look at a map.
that was 6 hours. I'm awful with geography. Did you grow up? Did you grow up having to know the state capitals?
No.
Okay, I was gonna say I didn't either, and I think that's to my detriment because I don't know where anything is.
I did have to grow up. I did grow up having to be able to write the name of a state in like a blank map. We also did it for countries in Africa too at my high school. So I may not be able to do it well now, but I have a general idea of where things are.
I've had to check multiple times just this week to make sure I knew where Iowa was. And honestly, Shakeia, if I'm being honest with you, I'm still not sure I could put it on a map. I have no sense of geography.
Chicago. It's not far from Chicago. If you know where Chicago is in your mind.
I do. I what I got. If it's a city, I'm better. But
okay,
man,
it's not super far from here. A friend of mine was going to visit another friend, and I drove him to the Illinois-Iowa border, and the other friend picked him up, and they continued on because that's how close it is.
Okay. Yeah, that doesn't feel like it should be accomplishable for me. Like in my mind, that's a 9-hour drive each way.
No, it's not far at all.
Yeah, I'm not good at this. But anyway, so actually, speaking of growing the game, because this is a thing that is currently happening, I guess, MLB has reportedly been in talk with Barstool Sports about emboldening them to broadcast MLB games.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a can of worms. Again, I'm not sure what they're trying to accomplish with it in a meaningful way. Obviously, in a pen to paper scenario, Barstool Sports has a broad base, I guess. No, not broad. A large following, and MLB would like to absorb some portion of that. But it once again feels like the worst way of accomplishing that because Barstool Sports is cancer on society. How did you feel when you saw this story come out?
Well, I haven't really had a take on it, to be quite honest. I've been just watching, mostly because MLB, apparently, at least the way it seems to me, they leaked that themselves, right? Like,
get a feel for how public reaction.
And I feel like you gotta know what the response was going to be on that. But maybe I don't know. It would be nice if they were definitely sticking their toe in the water and they were like, "Oh, actually, everyone hates this. Let's not." But I think it stinks. But I don't think it's out of character. Like, I think we have to remember to sort of level our expectations based on what we're looking at. And we can demand more, yes, but they are who they are. And this is not out of character at all. This fits. This fits. And because, and it's a common argument amongst the ownership water carriers, right? Is they're looking at it from a business perspective. Like, you know, Barstool is popular amongst young people and Barstool this. And I think what folks are missing is like, do you want that popularity? Are these the kind of people you want your brand to be known for, first of all? But secondly, the argument that there are good people at Barstool is kind of moot, simply
Mhm.
because no matter how good they are, all this other shit wasn't a deal breaker for them. It wasn't a deal breaker. They were not offended enough for my liking. So I've seen people say if MLB goes ahead with the partnership, they were gonna, stop watching the sport. I think they're lying, but if they do, more power to them. Um, it's just I think it's a bad idea, but again, it's not out of character.
I I take a special exception to the argument that it's on paper good for business. And I feel that way because I can't imagine it feels very retrospective, which again fits for MLB. But just because something has grown X amount over X amount of years doesn't mean it's going to continue doing that.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why that would seem to apply here is I would imagine Barstool has grown as much as it's going to grow. Because I think at this point, if you're familiar with the brand, you're either totally cool with what they've got going on there, or you're reviled by it and don't find it compelling and don't find it interesting. And again, they're bad, and you would like to avoid being associated with a brand that does bad things and houses bad people. And I
Yeah.
think the segment of the population that reflects those values is probably going to end up being a faster growing populace than the population of people who are all aboard the Barstool bandwagon and listen to all their podcasts and consume all their media or whatever.
Hmm.
And it's that future outlook that I think is, again, very on brand for MLB, but so much so to its detriment. It would be far more interesting if you actually lifted up voices that say something new and different and unique and have a perspective on the game that is both relevant to today and progressive than something that is as brutish and sophomoric as you could possibly achieve to be. You can't brute
I also
force
think
yourself
we'll
into
never
growth.
know. We'll never know if their attempts are successful really because there's no transparency. We don't know. We know what they tell us. So like they could go through with this situation with Barstool and it could be really bad, but we would never know. And other than like public reception we know about. And maybe if they lost a ton of money, but I don't think they would want to cop to making a mistake.
Oh
Like
God, no,
this
never.
is yeah, so we'll either way it goes, we'll never know whether it was successful or not.
Yeah, one of my random notes here that I wrote down is that the commissioner's job should be progress because coming up with rule changes can be done by a survey monkey survey. Um, because I mean, if you're not making ostensible large sweeping changes and you're just sitting there making up rule changes that people will either agree with or disagree with, then like I mean send out a fucking survey to everyone's inbox to see
Yeah.
what they want to do. Like no one needs you. But anyway. I don't want to hold up too much more of your time because you've already been
Okay.
very generous with it, but I do have just a couple more questions for you because
Okay.
I'm curious as a baseball history person and someone who's very active on Twitter about baseball, but I don't often see the sabermetric side of it. Where do you fall in your thinking about the numbers side of baseball? This has been, I
I
think, a little
don't.
bit more of a contentious topic as of late.
I don't. I don't. Like I I'm smart enough to understand, but I don't care enough about it. Like I like the nuance of the sport. I like the narratives in the sport. It's baseball is a very story driven, you know, sport. I don't really care about the sabermetrics. I'll let everyone else deal with that. I will say I don't like that it is often used to determine that, people of color are not smart enough for the game or don't know enough to do certain jobs, managers, GMs and things like that. But for me personally, the Stroman calculations is as deep as I've probably ever gotten into anything math related with baseball. Like, just the honest to God truth. I am so grateful for the stats folks at BP and Baseball Reference and RotoWire, because I just use their numbers. I check and see what matches or whatever I need, and I use those. But I don't know. I think you can enjoy the game without it. I think you can write the game without it. I think the human element is still far more important than anything else. And you can't math your way through that part of the game anyway. You can, obviously, there's, 3 true outcomes and all that, but like, there's still going to be something you didn't account for. And that's what I like, the humanity of it.
As a math person in my heart, I struggle to say too much more than in my heart because, well, I mean, we all have our shortcomings, and I minored in math, and oh boy, did that barely happen. I love the number side of it because I love numbers, and I love seeing how did that happen? If a home run got hit, I treat a lot of those stats as fun facts, and they can be useful if someone is overperforming or underperforming, because you can say, well, because that was my big thing with Gary Sanchez over the past few years as a man who loves Gary Sanchez, that he was hitting the shit out of the ball. It was just going to people and he was getting unlucky. And it was very vindicating to have numbers to say that. But there's also got to be, I think, a level of understanding that they're so far from everything that basing your life around it and how you consume the game is wrong. Like, we can sit here and say Gleyber Torres this season, Yankees fan, so I'm thinking of all Yankees. Gleyber Torres this season is hitting the ball very softly. Does that mean Gleyber Torres sucks? No. Soft contact's bad, yeah. But what makes Gleyber Torres a good or a bad hitter is going to be what's going through his mind and the actual mechanics of what he's doing. And it's the mechanical part of it that we're just, me anyway, a more casual in that I'm outside of the literal world of baseball fan is never going to know. I can't look at Gleyber Torres' swing and say that's off balance. I have no fucking clue. And most people who are going to comment on Gleyber Torres' stats this season have no fucking clue, because we've never played baseball at that level. We've never coached at that level. We've never been coached at that level. And so I can look at a man whose, average exit velocity this season is like 86 or whatever, or 84, and go like, oh, that's not good. That doesn't mean he sucks though. He's like a 24-year-old kid who is doing something mechanically that is not allowing him to get to that point, or having something go through his head. And that's never going to show up on a stats sheet. And that's the tough part about it. It's like the same thing for me with one of the things that bothers me so much is the stolen base conversation. Because I think the idea that a 20% caught stealing rate is the worst thing ever is absolutely fucking stupid. And I think it is an insult to baseball players' intelligence, because I think more so than being afraid of giving up outs, teams should be encouraging players to get a sense of when pitches are going to go in the dirt based on count and setup, and teach them to run with a better efficiency on understanding the game and being fucking fast, because a lot of players can do it. And it can be a skill that you work on, instead of saying you weren't quick enough, or we're too afraid of you making an out, we're not going to let you do it. What's that getting you? How on earth is being on second with no outs really that much worse than being bases empty, 1 out, if you can do it a significant portion of the time, and you can teach that as a skill to your ball players? Because I'm willing to bet a lot of those dudes are fucking smart as shit and can figure it out. Oh, that's the tough part for me. But, All right, last question, and then I promise I'll let you go.
Okay.
Where will the Bears finish this season?
So I don't know. I don't have even a guess because I haven't even thought about it, to be quite honest. I will say this. I don't think they're at the bottom anymore. I think Dalton starts the season and Justin Fields is in by week 3. And I think we roll from there. Like, I'm a little nervous. It's nice to be excited about the Bears for a change. I'm gonna make a bold prediction that the Bears do beat the Packers at least once this season.
Okay.
You know, I know Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams have this whole like thing going, The Last Dance, and I'm just like, fuck out of here with that shit. Like, you're not Jordan and Pippen. Get out of here. Get out of here. The only team you beat is the Bears. Go away. So I'm looking forward to that. I don't really know where they're gonna finish. Like I said, they're not at the bottom this time though.
What outcome though for the Bears season would make you be like, all right, this was a good year?
Oh, I don't want to even do the typical Bears fan thing and go, well, if we finish. Well, there's an extra game this season,
Yeah,
right?
17
There's
game
17
season.
games. So there's no going 8-8.
Over or under?
That's out the window. So I guess I'm gonna go 10 games. They win 10 and I'm good. They win less than 10, I'm not happy.
I see. As a Jets fan, my standards are so low. My standards are so bottom barrel low. Like genuinely, if they win 6, I think I'm thrilled.
See that? I can see that. I've always been if the Bears go 8-8, then it was a success. So I feel like I can't do that now. So I got to go 10.
I don't think I can be happy until Belichick and Brady are both retired. And I know Brady's not in the division anymore. He's not in the conference anymore. I know. It still makes me annoyed that he's here. And so I don't think I can feel as though the Jets have any ability to do anything until Belichick's out of New England and Brady's off the planet, for multiple reasons, but but I
Not
pray
a
for
Tom Brady fan, so I'll leave it alone.
You're a Brady fan?
I said I am not a Tom Brady fan. Don't ever.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna leave that one alone, is what I was saying, because I never have anything nice to say about him.
No one should. I've been hurt so much by him over the years, as purely as a Jets fan, not even as a human being. That one year, a few years ago, one of my friends got me tickets, Jets Pats at MetLife, thinking I would like that, and I was furious.
Oh.
And I told him, like, you are ruining. It was a Monday Night Football game. I was like, you are ruining a Monday and a Tuesday for me. And you know what happened?
Sunday too, because you were anticipating that L.
You know what happened at that game? Jets lost by 30. Was never close. Oh, and that is.
I mean, it was the thought that counts, right?
No, because you know what? That's thoughtless. That's thoughtless. Don't spend money on me having a bad time. You should know. It's been 20 years at this point. You know what I'm getting out of that.
Right. You're like, no, this isn't healthy. This isn't fun for me.
No, please, get us tickets against a bad team. Jeez, come on.
Yeah.
I don't want to see this. Get us tickets against the Lions.
I'm definitely not mature enough to go to a guaranteed loss. Like, just not mature enough. I'm not a bad sport externally, but internally I'm a bad sport. Like, I don't act out or anything, but on the inside I want to fight. So I would have been upset about that.
I just get very sad. I took my girlfriend with me. She was very excited. It was her first primetime game, and I parked and like had to mentally prepare to get out of the car.
I've been hurt so much.
Poor thing.
uh anyway, this was really, I have like literally almost a half a page more questions, but we've already been doing this for quite some time, and
Yes.
I am sorry for chewing up so much of your night, but I really
It's
appreciate
okay.
you spending the time here. It was so nice having you.
Thank you for having me.
We're gonna of course have to have you back when my co-host is here to also ask you questions.
Okay.
You'll like him. He's very quiet but very tall. Uh, which never shows up on camera, but I just love saying it because he is 6'8", and it is very, very hard to miss him in stores. Um,
Okay.
but Shakeia, where can people find you? Where can people find your latest works, and where can people hear from you?
It just everything is on Twitter. Curly Fro. I tweet the links or post the pods, and anything else in between is always on my Twitter. For links to previous things that I've written is actually on hishakeia.com.
Which I've been on a lot recently to make sure I was current. Um, well, all right, Shakeia Taylor, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And welcome back. Thank you again to Shakeia for coming on. I was horribly nervous, and I hope that did not come through. You guys missed at the beginning where I spent a long time complaining before the show, before we started recording, about how my face looks now that I shaved. Which, God, I'm looking at myself right now, and I still just God. But anyway, that's not neither here nor there. She was just so much fun to talk to. I'm really glad that she agreed to come on, and just appreciate the time. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of other things that have been happening in the world of sports that we didn't touch on because this was an interview episode, and there's other things happening in the world. But as per usual, I'd like for this to stand on its own and be its own thing. And holy shit, y'all just see that fucking lightning? God damn. Anyway, so touch on other things later, especially when Corwin's actually here to get into a few of the things that have been happening in the world as of late. So reasons to stay tuned for Monday's episode. But until then, you can follow the show on Twitter at Juicing Pod. You can follow myself on Twitter at Joshua D. Tracy. Totally just forgot my name for a second there. I'm used to Corwin saying Corwin's first, even though he's not here, but you can follow him at Corwin Heller. They just send emails to the show. You can do so at juicingthenumbers@gmail.com. And until Monday, y'all have a good one.